If you have your Bibles, turn to Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. Warning, danger ahead. Now, have you ever seen signs like that when you're going down the road? I think sometimes they do the opposite of what they're supposed to do. I think a lot of times they just make me interested in what's ahead. One of my favorites is the sign that says danger falling rocks, which makes me want to stop and look at rocks falling. And really, what can you do if rocks are falling? Can you, are you going to dodge them? I think it's just like, hey, you might die here, is kind of what it's saying. This last week when we were traveling, or week before last, we were traveling to North Carolina. In Oklahoma, I saw my first, warning bear crossings sign. Watch out for bears, which made me want to do what? Stop. I was like, guys, if we sit here long enough, they're promising that a bear will come across here. And so we didn't see any bears. Leslie thinks she saw a bear in North Carolina, but we're not sure. But the reality is this world is full of dangers like that. And that's why there's this, in Amazing Grace, there's that classic line, through many what? Dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. One of my favorite lines in The Lord of the Rings, if I could pick favorite lines, is that line from Bilbo when he says, it's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step into the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. And that's an appropriate quote for where we're about to be in Proverbs chapter 6, because Solomon is going to point out to his son in chapter 6 several general dangers that he needs to be aware of. And each is going to have a warning, and then, how it could lead to some type of destruction. And when he does that, when Solomon is just doing this, he's really just doing what a good father does. We all do this as parents. We all have those warnings, and we all remember the warnings that our parents pointed out to us before we even knew about the danger. The things to warn us before we got into the trouble. So you tell your children things like, don't touch the stove. Don't go out into the road. Don't talk to strangers. These are all warnings. Don't go near the edge. Stay away from the pool. Those sorts of things, what we're doing there is we're setting up warnings for things that our kids don't know yet to be scared about. Because we're trying to keep them safe from the problem instead of having to rescue them from the problem. And when a father gives these warnings to his children, he's not trying to rob his children of life. Why don't you let me just jump into pools? My parents won't even let me touch stoves. It's not trying to rob our kids of things when we set these in place. A father who does this is trying to preserve his child's life. Now, as children, we might ask, well, why so many rules? Why are there so many? I feel like my life is full of danger. Watch out for this. Danger, danger. But the father sees what the child cannot see and doesn't even know to be looking for yet. The father knows the fire. He knows the traffic. He sees those things. He knows the predators that are out there. He sees the cliffs before the child even feels himself falling. A good father doesn't wait for his child to be on fire to warn him about the dangers of the stove. He doesn't wait till his child is in the road to warn him about traffic. He doesn't wait until his child has filled his lungs with water to warn him about the dangers of drowning. That's the spirit of Proverbs 6. Solomon's not giving random moral advice here. He's speaking as a father to his son, saying, son, there are ordinary dangers in this world that destroy ordinary people every day, and I want to warn you about them. These are not exotic dangers. These are not wild. These are common snares that will come up in everybody's life. So our next lesson from Solomon's book is going to run from verses 1 through 19, and it's a fatherly warning. He's going to point out these common dangers that look ordinary enough, but that a father knows that beneath these ordinary sins are extraordinary ruin. And so he warns his son about these particular ones. And we're going to actually start with the first warning in verses 1 through 5, which is going to be a financial one. So let's stand in the honor of reading the words of our God. We stand thankful to hear from our God. My son, if thou be surety for thy friend, thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger. Thou art snared with the words of thy mouth. Thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Do this now, my son, and deliver thyself when thou art come into the hand of thy friend. Go, humble thyself, and make sure thy friend. Give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thine eyelids. Deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, and as a bird from the hand of the fowler. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. All right, you may be seated. So in this section, Solomon's going to caution his son about 4 specific dangers, each going to have sort of this sudden and sure calamity with it. He's going to talk about the danger of surety, this financial one. He's going to talk about the danger of sloth, the danger of lawlessness, and he's going to end sort of a culmination with the danger of just living the type of life that makes the Lord angry. Today we're going to start with that first danger, and it's a financial danger. Today's sermon is titled, The Sure Snare. The Sure Snare, How Financial Obligations Ruin Households. The Sure Snare, How Financial Obligations Can Ruin Households. Our finances, what you have in your household, those are blessed provisions from the Lord. And we should use them rightly. We are but stewards of the Lord's storehouses for His children. And part of the right use, part of stewarding our finances, is understanding what particular dangers might come and rob us of those finances, rob us of those blessings, and make us bad stewards of what the Lord has given His children. Now, when you look at this, you might not think that financial danger, you think Solomon's writing to his son, one of the wealthiest men in the world is writing to his son. You might think, why does he need to be warned about financial danger? This is nothing that a future king would have to worry about. But Solomon saw this as an important danger. And the Lord saw it. Remember, we looked at all of the Proverbs, 3,000 Proverbs that Solomon wrote. And out of those 3,000, this was one of the Proverbs the Lord said, no, everyone for all time needs to hear this one. And so he put this proverb in his book. And I think you're going to see that it is something that even Solomon's son need to worry about. So let's begin in that first verse. Here's the warning. My son, if thou be surety for thy friend, thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger. So there's the warning. My son, if thou be surety for thy friend. Now, what is a surety? Why did you call this a sure snare, a surety snare? Now, surety is an older word, but we still see it. We still see it in words like insurance. We'd probably, for this situation, we'd be more familiar with a term like co-signing on a loan or a bond. It's where someone borrows money and you, who are not borrowing the money, say, I'll vouch for him. I'll vouch for him, and if he doesn't pay it back, I will. I'm so sure that he's going to pay it back that you don't need to be afraid of him borrowing the money. If he doesn't, I will. Solomon warns his son that if you take on that position for a friend, then not just them, you have shaken hands in the arrangement. In other words, it is not a lesser pledge simply because you're not the borrower. And you can't look at that and say, well, I'm not really the one borrowing. He is. I'm just co-signing. I'm just being the surety in this. Solomon's saying, son, you are just as obligated to make sure that it is paid as the borrower himself is. And now you can imagine how a future king would be constantly needed in situations like this, because he is going to be vastly wealthy. You can imagine, hey, I know it doesn't look like I can afford this loan, but I'm really good friends with the king. I'm really good friends. He'll vouch for me. He'll vouch for me. And so the loaner comes to you and says, hey, this is your friend? Yeah, he needs to borrow this. He says you would be his reference. You would co-sign onto this for him. I mean, we see in our day and age the vast number of celebrities and wealthy people that have those entourages with them, right? They're never alone. There are always people with them, like leeches. And what they're doing is they're making their living from the scraps of the very large table of the wealthy, right? If you're at someone's table and they're eating a fine feast and they're kind of just dropping scraps on the floor, you can probably make a good life off of what they drop. And that's what's going on here. They're not themselves able to enrich their lives except through their connection with the wealthy. So this is actually a very reasonable warning for Solomon to give to his son, and especially to a king. But it's also reasonable for anyone who will be blessed by the Lord in their life. Your success, your financial diligence and the Lord's blessings of it, your hard work, will draw people to your success as a means to advance their own. Or it might be that you're at the beginning of financial blessing. You're like, look, no one's coming to me for a loan right now. It might be like you're in the Solomon position. No one's coming to you for financial blessing, but the Lord is growing household wealth in you, maybe one of the first generations of it, and you're wanting to bless your children. You've set up things so your children will be better off than you, and you're making them better off now, not just when you die, and their lives are going to be the type of lives where people will come and say, hey, then you need to hear this. That by seeking to use the blessing that has flowed from your hard work, others might come to your children, seeing the blessing that you worked hard to give them, and say, hey, can you vouch for me? People who ask, hey, can I get a little bit of help with something? I know the Lord has blessed you, and I just need a hand. They're not afraid to mention the Lord in these situations. Like I mentioned with the cop in Tanzania that was trying to shake me down for $100. He didn't mind referencing the Lord and quoting all sort of prosperity gospel stuff to me. He knew the Bible, and he wanted to use the Lord to snooker me. He didn't know that I knew jiu-jitsu. No, he didn't know that I had friends around me. He asked, he said, are you traveling alone? And that's when I was like, all right, this is creepy. But what was he trying to do? He was even trying to use biblical type language to sort of emotionally get me to give him what the Lord had given us. Now, this is not a warning here about things like surety or co-signing as being always bad or a sin. That's not what the passage is saying. The passage is not saying never co-sign, never go in surety. Surety is not always bad. It's not always dishonest when someone asks, nor is it always wrong for you to offer to help. It can actually be a way that the Lord blesses not just your household, but the whole household of God through the blessings he's given to your household. In fact, we see this in Paul. Paul takes on his co-signer for Onesimus. In the book of Philemon 18 and 19, Paul says, if thou count me therefore a partner, receive him as myself. If he hath wronged thee or oweth thee aught, put that on mine account. I, Paul, have written it with my own hand. I will repay it. Albeit I do not say to thee how thou owest unto me even thine own self besides. He puts a little thing in there like, but I shouldn't have to. But the problem comes when we don't realize the burden of the oath that we're putting ourselves under when we do this. And not just the burden of the oath, but the master we're taking on in these agreements. It's weird to think that a king would be a slave to someone else. But that's what Solomon is warning him about. When you take on a surety, you are enslaving yourself to a master. And he's warning his son, when he takes this oath, he is placing himself, he's placing the king, he's really placing the nation under a master that he doesn't know. What does he say? Thou hast what? Thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger. So you may know the friend, but the person that is going to be your master, the person who's going to be in control, you don't know if they're a good master. You don't know what they're going to be like, but they are They are a stranger to you. So Solomon is warning that surety should not be entered into any less cautiously than if you were binding yourself to the lender. There's no degrees of separation here. Because Solomon says, when you do co-sign with someone else, when you do take on that surety, you are striking hands. It's not just the lender and the borrower that are striking hands. You're striking hands with that stranger. You are the one placing yourself under the oath. The person needing the money might be a friend, but the one you're shaking hands with is a stranger. You're binding yourself to a master that you do not know, whether that master is a bank or a credit card company or the government, whoever it is. You're binding yourself not to your friend, but to a stranger, and you don't know what type of master they'll be. And so he warns him. He warns, this is a trap. This is a trap. Not that it could be a trap, but it's a trap not for the borrower, it's a trap for you. Look at what he says in verse 2. When you do this, what happens? Thou art snared with the words of thy mouth. Thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Remember, where did we just see these words? We just saw these words in Proverbs 5. When he described what happens when you shack up with a strange woman. So now those words of the binding, the ensnaring that comes with that great sin, he now, in the very next chapter, uses the same words to talk about what happens when we place ourselves willingly into someone else's debt. You're binding yourself. You're snaring yourself in your oath. You're binding yourself under someone who is a stranger to you. And you don't know if they'll be a good master or a bad one. And by the time you find out, it's too late. You've already, with your own mouth, ensnared yourself to them. You have cuffed yourself to them. And that's what we need to understand about the danger and the warning here. The danger here is, he's not saying the danger is that you'll lose money. Although you might, and that is a very real danger. You could, by doing this, you need to understand, when you sign up for these things, you could lose your finances. That's a possibility. The inheritance you've built for your children could be taken, not just from you, but from your children. So in taking on these loans, co-signing on these loans, you need to consider the ordo amoris here. You need to consider the right order of love and ask, am I, by taking this on, risking those to whom I owe a greater responsibility? Like, I owe a responsibility to this person as my friend, but not above the responsibility I have to my children in my own household. And I cannot risk them, I cannot put them at risk for someone that in the orders of love is actually below them, someone that I should love, but not in the same order and degree that I love my own family. Am I placing their future in jeopardy by willingly and maybe rashly taking on this arrangement? Because when we take on these oaths, you're not just binding yourself, you're binding your household to these agreements. That's why vows in general, but especially these types of vows, should be taken so cautiously. But the danger isn't just money. The danger is that you may lose, you lose your freedom, you lose peace, you lose your ability to steward how you want. You lose authority over your finances when you oath those finances to someone else. Because your mouth placed you under a master that you don't know, but that you're now bound in some way to obey. So Solomon warns his son about getting into this arrangement. He's like, look, people are going to come to you. This is going to happen. The Lord's going to bless you. The Lord's going to give you all of this. And as Christians, we know the Lord's going to bless your households. You're going to be better stewards than most of the world because you're not just earthly minded. You're generationally minded. You're building things. You're not just buying everything. And so people are going to see that. People who've been buying everything and don't have anything, they're going to see that and they go, that's who I need to go to. And so he warns you about getting into these types of things, about taking on this trap. But since the arrangement isn't itself inherently sinful, he doesn't just say, don't do this. He also tells him what to do if he does decide to take it on. What should you do if you are under a surety? And that's what he talks about in verses 3 through 5. And look at what he tells his son to do. Do this now, my son, and deliver thyself. When thou art come into the hand of thy friend, go humble thyself and make sure thy friend. Give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thine eyelids. Deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, and as a bird from the hand of the fowler. If you do agree to this, son, if you agree to this surety for someone else, if you bind yourself to the lender and to your friend, then what you need to do is work quickly to get out of it. Don't sleep, don't slumber. Get out like a deer trying to get away from a hunter, or a bird trying to get away from a fowler, because you're not just delivering them from the situation, you're delivering yourself. Now, he's not saying work quickly to get out of your oath. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying try to find a way to not have to pay it back. You're bound to your oath. You're bound to your word. Like Solomon himself warns later in Ecclesiastes, when he says, better it is that thou should not vow than that thou should vow a vow and not pay. So he's not saying don't pay it. Figure out how to get out of it. Figure out how to weasel out of it. He warns about getting into these situations, but now you've vowed the vow. You've made the pledge. You've agreed. And what should you do if you place yourself under another person's debt? The answer there is simple. You get to work making sure they get to work. That's what he says when he says, make sure thy friend. What he's saying is, look, you can't pay it off. And you don't want to. That's not the arrangement. That would be foolish. So what you need to do is work quickly to make sure that your friend pays it off. Make sure thy friend. So you can't do it for him. You can't pay it for him. That's not the oath you made, and that would be a foolish use of your finances. But what you can do is you can work hard to make sure your friend is paying, and paying early, and getting out of this, both himself and you, as quickly as possible. Look, I hate being late. I hate it. But I have found out that I cannot make other people be on time. No matter how much I huff and puff, I cannot make people be on time. Everyone likes to talk about Africa time, but I just think it's time. Because everybody's always late for everything. Like even though I think perpetual lateness is a sin, that's a whole nother sermon. I'm not going to get into it. But if I can't get other people dressed, if I can't do the work for them, it doesn't mean that I can't do anything. So I can work hard to help them get ready on time. I don't just, so on Sunday mornings, for example, or when we're getting ready for school, I don't just sit in the living room. I'm ready. Sort of waiting while the kids hustle and bustle about, and then they're going to be late and be like, Mom, you were late. Now I'm mad. I don't just do that. I looked at my phone. My kids can attest to this. On Sunday mornings, I have 10 different alarms set for my family to pace us, to make sure that we're doing everything when it needs to be done so that we can get out the door on time, to keep us on track, to keep us on time. And I just remind them, it's at 8:50, for example, time to find your shoes. Everybody, time to find shoes. Because what will inevitably happen is everyone will get dressed. They're like, I'm ready. And I'm like, all right, let's get in the car. And they'll go, I don't have shoes. And I'm like, shoes. So there are times for everybody. This person should shower then. This person should start getting dressed at this time. Everything along the way. This group needs to wake up here. That group needs to wake up there. Because I can't make them on time, but I can still work to get them on time. So Solomon's instruction to his child here, his first warning, is beware of binding yourselves to the loan of others. And if you do, you can't fulfill the work for them, but you can work hard to make sure that they fulfill the debt quickly. So if you do co-sign on with someone, don't think that you just have to watch back and watch them default and then just your money be gone. You have an obligation, and you can tell them you've got the scripture, to tell them that they need to themselves work hard to get out from under this master. And they can't use you as this parachute that keeps them from having to worry. Oh, I missed a few payments, but I don't have to worry. I've got a co-signer. You need to go to them, and since you can't do the work, you need to be like a deer trying to get out of a trap, trying to make them sure, trying to get them to pay off quickly what they owe. So that's his warning. Now that might seem like a simple warning, but I actually think it has a lot of good, meaty application for us today. And I'm going to spend a lot of time in some application here that I think is useful. The lessons may be to Solomon's son specifically as a surety, as a cosigner, but the lessons to the cosigner are true for anyone placing themselves under any debt to another person, either as a borrower or as a cosigner. And so I think we can learn some good things about finances here just in general from this. So let me give you just a few points of application that I think are important. First, your finances and the future of your finances are a genuine biblical concern you should have. There's something that is wise to look at. You need to be thinking about how your financial decisions will either help or hinder you, and how they will either help or hinder your children and the generations to come after you. Our economy is struggling because we are not very forward-thinking. We do not think generationally. Every generation is just thinking about itself. And so it doesn't want the government to cut. Everyone wants the government to balance the budget except the money the government's giving them. Everyone is just thinking about themselves, and we're just heaping this giant debt upon our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. And no one is willing to sacrifice for their children or their children's children. So what happens is the debt just grows and the future burden just keeps building. Now we've got, remember this, it was not long ago, you've got people throwing out 50-year mortgages. 50-year mortgages, which is just crazy, because what you're doing is, I get a 50-year mortgage, I'm only going to live 20 years. Ha ha. Who's paying that off? The bank doesn't go, oh, rats, they died. It goes after your children. It's not just, it's the debt that you, so instead of giving our children an inheritance, we've created a generation, multiple generations now, that are handing off to their children debt. That many times the inheritance they get from their parents, they find out is going to be used to pay off debt that their parents had accrued as well and not been able to pay off. Did not work quickly to pay off. You need to make financial decisions based on the impact they will have on your household. It is wisdom to consider this, and it is folly to ignore the lasting impact that finances can have on the strength of your home after you are gone. So that's the first thing. Second point of application that I think is useful. Don't confuse Christian love with reckless liability. All right? Don't confuse Christian love with reckless liability. Christians should be generous. Yes. Christians should bear each other's burdens. Christians should help the poor, the widow, the orphan, the brother in distress. But Proverbs 6 warns that there's a difference between helping someone and handing someone else control over your household. There's a difference between, brother, I can give you $500, and brother, I will legally bind my future income, my wife's security, my children's provisions, and my household's peace to your work and decision making, when it's probably their work and decision making, probably those very things that got them into the financial situation anyway. One is charity, the other is folly. And that's an important distinction. Christian generosity should be limited by what you are actually free to give. If you cannot lose what you are offering without sinning against your responsibilities, you probably shouldn't pledge it. A man can give away his coat, but he should not gamble away the coats of his household. And there's another lesson that can be hard to learn, especially in our age of emotional sabotage, which is don't let friendship pressure you into foolish vows. And if you want to have people who are not close friends all of a sudden be close friends, have them need money. That Facebook friend that you hadn't talked to since high school will all of a sudden, whip up some quick conversations with you. And you'll be like, we're really reconnecting. Notice the language here in Proverbs. What does it say? If thou be surety for thy friend. So this is not a stranger asking. This is a friend. And that matters because the pressure often comes through things like affection, pity, loyalty, fear of disappointing someone. Those fears can drive us to do what is actually financially unwise. A friend, when they get into dire situations, might say things like, I thought I could count on you. You know I'd do it for you. I just need your name on it. All I need is your name on it. Even a spouse. A spouse might say, we really need this. It'll make me real happy if we get it. I'll be so happy. Or, I'm sure we can pay off the card. But Proverbs teaches that friendship is not a substitute for wisdom. A Christian must not be manipulated by emotional appeals into obligations that God has not required of them and that He's actually warned them about. You may love your friend deeply. You may love your spouse deeply and still have to say, I cannot bind myself and our household to that. I can't. That's not hatred. That's not unloving. Often, in fact, that is actually wisdom. I mean, Solomon is warning his son, don't get into these things. He doesn't say, well, it's your friend, you got to get into them. He says, you shouldn't get into these. You need to realize what you're doing. But if you do, here's what you need to do to get out. And this is not hatred to just do what Solomon is telling his son to do. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to refuse to help a man continue a pattern of financial irresponsibility. You cannot be a financial enabler. Some people with finances are like drug addicts. They just can't, they never stop the financial irresponsibility. And what you do when you take on these things is you are just enabling their continued irresponsibility. Where his bad financial decisions are robbing his family. And if you take this on, could now rob yours as well. The Bible says, if a man will not work, neither let him eat. And I say, certainly don't let him keep you or your kids from eating. So be careful. Don't let friendship pressure you into foolish vows. Real friendship might be saying no. Real friendship to your family, who you have a greater responsibility to. Responsibility to heed God's warning, and responsibility to that friend as well. Your saying yes might actually be the thing that continues them into deeper financial ruin, even though you give them a Band-Aid for a moment. And it might not just ruin them, now you've tied your household to it. I'd also say this, and I think this is useful here. Men, because of the great burden that this is to our households, men, be careful with your oaths. Be careful with your word. Be careful with your mouth. Even for the future king. Even the king, there's no getting out of his word here. I mean, we'll talk in Proverbs more about the need to keep oaths and not be quick with them. Look, if you give your word that you'll do this, you've got to keep it, even if it's hard. You don't have to keep your word until it gets hard. If you make the oath, you got to keep it. So that means this passage has special force for husbands and fathers because a man's word rarely only affects himself. For Solomon, his son's word would affect an entire nation. For you, your word, your signature, affects those the Lord has placed under you. It might be your family. For some of you, it might be your business. Yes, your businesses are under your household. If a single man foolishly obligates himself, well, he's the only one that suffers. But if a husband and father foolishly obligates himself, his wife, his children, his employees, they often suffer with him. I was telling someone the other day that I can't have a motorcycle. And they asked why. And I said, because I have responsibilities. I have a household that's relying on me. And though it could be fun, I just can't think about myself. It would be foolish to do so. Not just because I could get hurt, but because I could set back my family and their families after me if something bad happened. That the impact of me making a decision like that could have generational repercussions. Which means, men, you must be even more careful with the oaths that you take on because of the impact your oath has on your house. It's interesting. There's an interesting passage in Numbers 30 where it talks about vows in general. And it warns fathers specifically about the vows that they take. And it even says that wives can't make vows without first talking to their husbands. Why does it say that? Why does it say, wives, you can't make vows unless you talk to your husband first? Now, if he okays it or doesn't say anything, then the household is bound. And that's why. Because her keeping or breaking the vow has consequences, not just for herself, but for the whole household. And so she needs to talk to the head of the household before she puts herself under any vow. Before she makes a vow, she's got to go to the one who has the responsibility over the household and say, hey, is this wise? Can we do this? Should I do this? Man, the Lord places a heavy burden on you and how your word and your keeping of your word will have consequences for you and for your household. There's a reason that for so long, it was a noble thing to be a what? To be a man of his word. That mattered for so long that no man would go back on his word. No, we shook hands on it. No man would go back on something like that. Today, we throw around vows that we never plan to keep. People make pledges they never plan to honor. We even have laws and we have lawyers whose sole form of income is helping people get out of their vows. The only way they make money is helping you legally break your vow. There will be consequences. I mean, the truth is there will be consequences for our nation for that. And there already have been consequences for our nation for not keeping our word. Don't let there be consequences for your household. So that means be very careful with taking on oaths because you are bound to them. You cannot get out of them. It would be worse for you to break it than it would be. When you look at it and say, man, if I keep this, this could be really hard. It'll be worse for you if you break it. So men, don't make a rash vow, especially in light of this context, especially financially. Ask things like, will this lead my wife to unnecessary and maybe even rational anxiety if I bind our household to this? Will this threaten my children's provision? Will this limit my ability to be generous later? Will this put pressure on me? If I've got to work hard to get out of this, will this put pressure on me to work excessive hours to pay it back quickly? Robbing my family maybe not of money, but of time with me. Because I made an oath that I've got to pay back quickly. And so now they have months, maybe years, where their father's having to work to get out from under an oath, years that they do not see their father as much as they could because their father made a rash vow with his finances. A man is not free to be generous with money his household needs for faithfulness. A man is not free to be generous with money his household needs for faithfulness. There is a false nobility that says, I would give you the shirt off my back. That sounds good, but you cannot take food off your kids' plates or rob their inheritance to give a shirt to a sluggard. That would actually be wronging your household. So men, be careful with your oaths, especially financial ones. Next, I'd say this, and we see this from this passage as well when he's warning about getting out of it quickly. Understand, debt is a master. And you need to work to set yourself free. Debt is a master. Work as hard as you can to set yourself free. Now, Solomon tells his son that he has to get to work telling his friend to get to work. You work hard making sure your friend becomes sure, making sure they get out from under the loan. Well, if that's true for the cosigner, if the cosigner needs to work hard, it's even more true for the borrower. It's not like, hey, the cosigner needs to really work hard, but the borrower, he can just laze around. The idea is, yes, if even the cosigner needs to work hard to get the friend out from under it, it's certainly true of the debtor. Solomon doesn't have to tell his son about debt because his son isn't going to need money. But you're not Solomon. And if you take a debt willingly, if it's a mortgage, even if it's a credit card, if it's school loans, any debt, good or bad, and that's a whole different discussion about which debts are good debts or bad debts. It doesn't matter if it was a bad choice or not. You made it. And when you make it, you place yourself under a master that you now work for. So I would tell you to listen to this warning, not just as a cosigner, but also as a borrower. When you take on debt, what master are you taking on? When you swipe that credit card, when you take on that school debt, when you sign up for that streaming service and say, this amount of my money out of my paycheck every month is going to go to them, I've obligated to them, I've signed up for it. Is this person a good master or a bad one? I'm obligating a piece of my paycheck to them. A piece of my household economy I'm not giving to us. I'm saying it's yours. Take it, supply me this service, and take it. What type of master are they? And the reality is, if you look at your finances, and you realize that you feel free, but you might look and financially you have 2, 3, 10, 20 masters that you've indebted yourself towards. 20 masters with hands on your work and on your paycheck. They get pieces of your provisions before they even come to your family. And you're not thinking how to get out from under them. You're not even thinking about it. You're not even thinking of, man, I've got a master over me and I need to work hard to get out from underneath that. You're thinking, I got 20 years. I got 30 years. I got however long. It's not bad. I'll pay it off next month. I'll pay it off in 6 months. I'll pay it off whenever. You need to understand that every debt you take on is a new master. And I think if we recognize that we're enslaving ourselves to these people in some form, it'll help us be more cautious with what the world calls free money. And that money may be free, but it comes with an enslavement. So if you take on a master, get to work paying off that debt and paying it off quickly. Your work ethic for your creditor, because they're your master, should be just as hard as your work ethic in general. If you find yourself in debt, work faithfully, but also work quickly to get out of it. Pay off your debts as quickly as you can. Recognize that debt is a master, and if you decide to take on a new master, work quickly to get out from underneath them, because as you know, it is hard to serve two masters. Now, lastly, I would say this. This wisdom in Proverbs 6, when applied rightly, this financial responsibility is actually a pathway to greater and more fruitful generosity. This isn't about turning off the siphon. It's about opening it up in a way that bears more fruit. When you master these things rather than them mastering you, it doesn't diminish generosity, it actually frees it. A man who masters his mouth, who masters his promises, who masters his debt, his obligations, actually becomes more useful to God and to his neighbor. Why? Because he's not constantly digging out of holes he made with foolish oaths. He's not spending tomorrow's provision on yesterday's impulses. He's not saying, I'd really like to help, but I already owe them this. That money is already owed to somebody, and I already oathed that I would give it. He's not using his family's bread to pay for another man's responsibility. There is a kind of generosity that feels noble in the moment, but actually destroys the opportunity for long-term fruitfulness. A man who rashly cosigns, who overpromises, a man who quickly gets into debt, things he cannot afford. When a person does that, when a person cosigns in the moment, they seem compassionate. But later, when real need arises, that money that they obligated, they're not now free to give. His household becomes strained by this very real oath and obligation. His wife is anxious because now she has no straw to make bricks. His children feel the cost. He can't provide maintenance for his girls because he's obligated that money to someone else. His own peace is gone, and his ability to offer help is diminished. The disciplined man can give more, not less. A man who governs his commitments, who masters them, can say yes with strength because he learned to say no with wisdom. He can give because he is not bound. He can lend for genuine need because he's not overextended himself. He can help the poor because he hasn't already pledged those resources to foolish ventures. He can be hospitable because his house isn't financially frantic. He can support ministries because his income isn't already chained to every rash promise he made. He can respond to emergencies because he didn't make every non-emergency into an emergency. So the warning of Proverbs 6 is not anti-generosity, it's pro-generosity. It just says, don't let foolish promises rob you of wise fruitfulness. It encourages you to give to that which bears fruit instead of giving in a way that actually feeds chaos. There is a difference between a generosity that bears fruit and a generosity that merely feeds disorder. I mean, some giving waters good soil, other is throwing seeds among thorns. Sometimes a man asks for help because he's suffered, but sometimes he asks for help because he's refused wisdom from others. Sometimes he's in need because of affliction, but sometimes he's in need because of his sloth or addiction or vanity or rebellion. Wisdom doesn't make us cold. It makes us discerning and actually helpful to both the borrower or the person seeking to borrow and to our own family. The generous man should ask, will this actually help my brother become more faithful? Or is this going to help him remain foolish? And that's a crucial distinction. I mean, if a man is hungry, feed him. If a man is overwhelmed, help him. If a man is repentant and trying to rebuild, then use your resources to strengthen him. But if a man wants you and your family to become the financial shock absorber for his folly, Proverbs says, beware. Sometimes the way a man can best bounce back is by falling on his own rear end. Sometimes the most fruitful generosity is actually not taking on his debt. Because Christian generosity isn't just aiming to remove the pressure from our brothers and sisters. Christian generosity is aiming at righteousness. A wise generosity is more fruitful. It's more fruitful both outwardly and inwardly. And that's why I said this is especially important for fathers and households. A wise household becomes a well-rooted tree, a generational tree, because it's not constantly being uprooted by debt, by rash vows, by emotional promises, because that's not always happening. It's allowed to bear fruit season after season. But a household constantly entangled in foolish obligations, rash vows, often has no margins for grace or action, even when those things are needed, because every dollar is already spoken for. Every act of charity is just going to create more stress, and every need ends up feeling like a threat and thinking, how are we going to make it? Proverbs 6 is warning us to guard the roots so that the tree can bear fruit. May the Lord bless us with fruitful homes and with the wisdom not to hand those homes over through foolish financial choices. Let's pray. As we take a moment to pray, I want to begin just by thanking the Lord. Before we pray, just thank the Lord. Thank Him for what He has given you. Thank Him for what He has provided and what He's promised to provide to you and to your future generations, the blessings that come just in blessing from the Lord, but also in just living the way the world was meant to be lived, just living rightly. God made the world to work, and He's at work. So thank the Lord for His provisions for your family. Thank Him how He's always provided, how He's provided abundantly, even through times that you've been foolish, and that He would have every right to take away as consequences the wealth of your family for 3 to 4 generations. But in His kindness and grace, He's continued to bless you, provide. Just thank God for that. And now pray and ask God to make you wise with your finances. Ask that you would see it as a steward of His wealth, not your own. Of His provision for His children, His inheritance that He's given them. So you wouldn't use His finances like some sort of prodigal, just spending them willy-nilly. Ask Him, if you're younger, children, ask Him to make you wise with the finances that are going to come. You'll be like, I don't have any finances. No one's asking to borrow from me. Ask Him to make you wise now, so that when blessings do come, you don't waste them. When you have that you don't waste the blessed season of not having to pay for rent and utilities and insurance and all this stuff, that you wouldn't waste those times with frivolous spending or debting yourself. Ask Him that you would be a man and a woman of your word. That you would see in this the great power of oaths and the great obligation to them. That no matter how rash the culture is, and no matter how often they think, well, you just gave your word, just back out of it. Did you sign anything? Did you sign anything? That you'd be a man whose yes is yes and whose no is no. And you wouldn't try and find some way to get out of what you said, even if you shouldn't have said it. You did say it. And so I ask that you would understand the power in your word, and that you would not be quick to give it, that you would be wise and discerning and slow, and that the Lord would give you a good helpmeet to help you be slow in moments. Ask the Lord to make of your home a fruitful tree. A a tree that lasts for generations, able to bless not just now, but later and later and later. And pray that you would not be the one who foolishly poisons the roots and stunts its growth. That you would be wise, that He would make you wise, He would teach you these things, that you would heed the things He has taught you, these warnings. Ask God to bless you with a fruitful home, that you might bless others, that you might bless your children, and that you might show the glory of what it means when God is your God and you are His people. Father, we come to you this morning. And Father, the world often doesn't want us to even talk about financial things, because the world doesn't want us thinking about our finances, because if we're not thinking about them, we're more apt to be rash in them. But Father, we don't want to be rash. We want to be wise. And if, Father, you bless us and bless our homes, allowing us to be stewards of your great wealth, if these great blessings that you heap upon us, Father, help us to be wise in how we use them. Help us to beware of masters that we bind ourselves to, strangers that we would indebt some of your provision to, and help us to work quickly to get out from underneath them. Father, help us to be men and women of our word. Help us to be wise leaders of our households, Father. And God, make fruitful trees in our various kingdom outposts. Fruitful trees in a world of weeds and thorns, that we would shine the great glory of the God who provides, and of His people who are good stewards of God's provision, and how that grows and grows. Help us to be wisely generous, Father, that we might be immensely fruitful. Please, Father, teach us these things. Let us heed your warning, and let us be wiser than we deserve to be. It's in Christ's name we ask this. Amen.